Today, I'd like to invite you to celebrate Dr. Laura Mason with me. Laura was a client who has made the incredibly brave journey through recovery and, quite honestly, has transformed her life. Laura, welcome, welcome, welcome to the podcast. I am beyond excited to be chatting to you today and unbelievably proud of you and your journey.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. It feels very strange to be talking to you on this because I've listened to your podcast. So yeah, it feels weird thinking that we're going to be on it. But yeah, thank you.
I remember that feeling from when I was on my first podcast with Victoria. But wow, you have, honestly, you're incredible. You have made me so proud, and I've been so impressed with your strength and resilience and determination at every step. So can you share a little bit about your life before recovery? What was your relationship with food and exercise like?
Yeah, sure. So immediately before recovery with you, I would say I was in a state of quasi-recovery where no one would really know there was a problem from the outside. I was functioning, I had a good job, I had a partner, social life, everything was normal. And on the outside, you'd see someone that was eating what you might say was healthily and exercising. But on the inside, I was beating myself up constantly thinking about food, planning food, overthinking food, worrying about gaining weight, worrying about my body, was just in this hell prison of constantly not being able to focus on other things around me and not feeling good enough. And I knew that there was a problem. I knew I didn't feel right. I felt tired, cold, snappy, very irritable, very inflexible. If my partner decided we could go out for a meal, I would freak out inside because I hadn't restricted during the day and I was scared, didn't want to go. So that would cause issues with my friends, with my relationships. And I just recognized that I wasn't really living a full life. I was just going through the motions, I would say.
So what was your turning point, and when did you realize that recovery was possible and necessary for you?
I'd always thought recovery was possible. I think typical black and white, all or nothing thinking. I had this vision of recovery as this amazing euphoria where everything would be amazing in my life. And I had wanted it for years and tried many different things for years. And I think the turning point for me, when I started having coaching, was when I realized the work I'd done in the NHS was helpful to some extent, but wasn't enough. And I needed to do it on my own. I needed to do it for me. And no one could do it for me. And I realized that I needed some more in-depth, more practical support, more than I could get from NHS. And I was at a point in my life where I felt at a crossroads. So I just qualified. I'd bought a flat. I'd moved in with my partner and we were about to get married. And I felt that that was the start of my new life. And I didn't want to go into it living this half life. I didn't feel that it was fair on my partner to not be my full authentic self and not to be, I didn't feel it was fair to continue what I was doing. And I realized if I didn't recover properly now, I never would. And it would cause issues from all my relationships and my life in the future. So I just turned 30, and I think maybe hitting that age made me realize that I wasn't as young as I thought I was. And I needed to sort things out now before the rest of my life began. And I was also thinking of kids and not wanting to pass this on and not wanting to not be fully present with children. So it was the right time, definitely.
Definitely was. So you really just wanted a completely new life. You had so many bricks in place and bringing in the eating disorder was not something you were willing to do.
Yeah, and I could almost see myself going on as I currently was, and everything would be fine. You know, I wouldn't lose my job, I wouldn't lose my relationship, it would be all right. But it wasn't as 100% as I wanted it to be. And I felt like I would regret it when I got older. And I could see an alternative life where I was free and I had fully beaten everything. And I could see that potential and really wanted that, because I've also seen a lot of people die as well with my job. And that makes you think about how short life is. You only get one chance. And I thought, I get one chance. I don't want my one chance to be plagued by eating disorders my entire life. So let's do something about it now.
Fantastic reason. What would you say are some of the biggest challenges you've faced on this recovery journey?
So a big one for me has been slowing down. I've realised a lot of the behaviours that made me quite good at my job and have got me to where I am in my career, they can be helpful, but they're also maladaptive when it comes to home life. And I needed to learn how to turn that drive off and to just accept that things don't have to be perfect. So I used to be very on the go all the time. I would always be achieving, always learning, always pushing myself, which in some respects has been great. But then it does leave you feeling burnt out. And I got myself into a place where I felt I wasn't good enough if I wasn't achieving. And I felt people around me wouldn't love me if I wasn't achieving. But what I've learned through this journey is that, it's so cheesy to say it, but it is true, that I've learned that I am okay as I am, and that my family love me if I'm not achieving, and that's fine. Like, I don't need to rush all the time.
It's so true. And as part of our coaching journey together, we explored where those beliefs of needing to be as perfect as possible and achieving and stuff had come from through inner child work.
Mm-hmm.
How did you find the inner child work, and did you find it helpful? Did it make a big difference to your understanding of why you were believing you weren't good enough and that you had to achieve?
Yeah, it definitely did. I've done some of that work before we started working together, but I think it was very helpful to pick it back up and to have a different perspective on it with your help, and really go back through to how I was as a little girl, and things that I might have thought were irrelevant actually did tie into how the eating disorder developed. So, for example, I remember being bullied a lot for my skin. When I was at school, I had really bad eczema on my face, and I didn't really connect that with the eating disorder. But going back through, it made me appreciate how, as an 8-year-old, that fear then made me feel not good enough. And then I then found restricting food as a way of feeling good enough and a way of altering my appearance, because I couldn't change my skin, but I could change my weight and I could control my weight. And then that helped stop the bullying, and it also made me feel better. So that's a small example, but there's loads of things like that that I didn't really put in with the eating disorder. And doing that work, I think a lot of people don't really appreciate how deep they go, eating disorders.
Yes.
It really isn't about the food. And it's taken me 10 years to realize that. And there were periods where I was eating pretty well, but you can still have an eating disorder in your head, even if you're eating well. And
absolutely.
Yeah, I think that inner child work and working with you has made me appreciate some of the deeper stuff and the more emotional stuff, rather than just focusing on food, which a lot of traditional treatment does.
Yeah. I love that you brought up that you can actually be eating fairly well and still have an eating disorder in your head, because it does have some better times and some worse times. Otherwise, I mean, I would never have survived as long as I did in an eating disorder if I was totally restrictive the whole time. I would have literally just died of starvation, if nothing else. So to the outside world, it's possible to get away with almost having an eating disorder with no one knowing for a really, really long time.
Yeah, it's so interesting, isn't it? Yeah, I mean, a lot of my friends didn't really understand the full extent, and on paper, you know, I was eating regularly, meals, snacks, my weight was stable. I looked from the outside slim, but not skeletal. So you wouldn't realize I was battling this dialogue in my head all the time, unless I told people about it. So I think that's what it makes it quite difficult to treat, and also for people to accept help, because I think a lot of people think they need to be literally starving themselves or
Yes,
yeah,
enough.
yeah. Whereas I didn't look physically unwell. I was working full time as a doctor. Everything was fine on the outside. So it was almost harder to accept that I needed to do something about it.
Did you find that your position of being a doctor made it harder to seek help because people hold doctors on pedestals and kind of assume that doctors don't get sick?
Yeah, very much so. It's an interesting perception that society has, and I see this a lot. So I, as a GP, I will treat other doctors who have got lots of mental health issues, but they don't feel able to tell anybody because of that perception that we're a caring profession and we know everything. And if I say to a patient that I'm not feeling well, if I had a flu and the patient saw that, people really freak out when they see their doctors unwell, because in their heads, doctors are machines, we're invincible, we don't get sick.
Yeah, it's like magic.
Yeah, absolutely. I wish. So it did make it a lot harder, but not so much the seeking help. I think it was more during the recovery. I found it difficult because I have to advise patients on nutrition every day.
Yes.
And I have a lot of stuff that I've learned about nutrition, which in theory is correct, some of it. And a lot of the advice I might give somebody for gut health is going to be beneficial for them. So it made it harder for me to go and eat loads of chocolate when I was telling someone not to eat that kind of food. It felt quite alien to go against my perception of what health was when it came to food and do the exact opposite.
Actually, that's interesting. Has your journey through your own recovery changed your perception of the health you've been taught, the nutritional information you've been taught in your doctor training?
It has. We don't get taught much in medical school about nutrition at all, like 1 or 2 lectures, if anything. So the stuff I've learned has been since I qualified because I'm interested. And I've learned a lot because I'm doing a diploma in nutrition at the moment. But it has definitely made me realise how important the social aspect of food is and the psychological aspect of food. I was looking at it from a very scientific medical perspective. And I've learned that nutrition is very individual. So at the time that I was poorly, I needed to eat Snickers to get through that phase where my body just craved chocolate. So an apple for me wouldn't have been the healthiest choice, which felt very alien, but it is individual. And I've also learned that sometimes the healthiest choice is the one that might not be the best on paper, but that in your head is the right psychological choice and the one that goes along with what other people are doing. So, for example, if I went to, recently I went to a friend's house, they cooked food for us, and it was incredible to just be able to go and just eat what was given and not think about it and not worry about it. And the stress, the cortisol that's created from worrying about the food is so much more unhealthy for you sometimes than just eating the food.
Yes, 100%. Yeah, worrying about it is so much worse than anything you actually put in your mouth.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So how did it feel once you began to really see some of the particularly mental changes in your recovery process? Because you have grown as a person from essentially, and I hope you don't mind me saying, essentially a scared little girl is kind of how you came across. Not, I mean, you were always a professional, but how you viewed yourself and how you thought others thought about you and
Yeah.
their expectations of you was scared.
Mm-hmm.
And now you are, well, you're so stepped into your own power. It's incredible. And you have boundaries and you ask for your needs to be met and you don't self-sacrifice in order to please others. So
Mm-hmm.
how does that feel?
It feels very freeing. I think what was interesting is that I agree with your perception, but you wouldn't, like, I was obviously very vulnerable with you, and you
Yes.
wouldn't have seen that from the outside.
No,
So,
I agree.
like at work or with friends, no one could see that I was overthinking everything, and I was overthinking other people's reactions and perception of me, and I was caring too much about what other people thought. But no one knew it because I wasn't telling them. So I was covering it up really well.
Yeah.
And I was projecting that onto not eating or controlling my food. But one of the most freeing things I've been learning is that it's genuinely my perception of myself that's the most important thing. And I cannot believe that I'm actually saying this, and I do mean it. It's not I don't care at all, but I care much less about what other people think. And that is very freeing. Very freeing. I'm just reflecting on some things that have happened in the past. For example, if I've had a negative comment from a colleague at work, if I'm not staying late at work to do extra work, they might say a bad comment about that. And in the past, that would have really freaked me out, and I would have felt awful, and I'm not a good enough person, I'm not a good enough doctor. I would have projected that small comment into a big thing. But now I'm able to realize that saying no to staying late is actually saying yes to my partner and saying yes to myself and my family. And I can't be perfect in every area of my life. That's not reasonable. So it's just really freeing to know that I don't need to prove myself all the time.
Because you're good enough exactly as you are.
Yeah, yeah. And I do think a lot of that psychology relates even if people haven't got eating disorders.
Yes.
So I do think a lot of people, they want to make themselves feel good enough by maybe having a fast car or an expensive watch or an attractive partner or having an amazing social media feed. And I think there's a lot of people walking around who don't feel good enough and who are comparing themselves to other people. Yeah.
Because I think until we stop looking externally and start going internally and giving ourselves what we need rather than trying to find happiness in all the things,
Mm-hmm.
we never do quite feel good enough because it always has to come from within.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Definitely.
Did it surprise you when you realized quite how much of your life, like every aspect of your life, was affected by the eating disorder?
Yeah, it did. I knew it was more than food. I didn't quite appreciate how much it was affecting my confidence and affecting my ability to say no and my ability to sit down and not rush all the time. Didn't really link all those things together. So yeah, it did surprise me. And I also want to say, there's still times where I have thoughts of, I need to do this thing perfectly, otherwise it'll still come up. But the difference now is that I'm recognizing it and I'm able to negotiate with that thought and recognize that it's not a healthy thought And I know as time goes on, that gets easier.
Yes, yeah. I mean, thoughts come up, I think, for everybody in life, but it's your ability to deal with them that changes.
Yeah.
And the amount of fear and stress they bring you that changes. It's like, take body image. Some days I'll look in the mirror and I'm just like, I don't like what I'm seeing today.
Yeah.
And then I'm like, oh, well, it is what it is. Never mind. This is me. And it doesn't ruin my day. I don't get upset. I don't need to hide away. I don't make it mean anything about me. Whereas it used to mean everything.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. I remember days where you get up, stand on the scale. Oh, I've gained 2 pounds. Oh my gosh, that's it.
Yeah.
The whole day's ruined. And obviously your weight fluctuates daily anyway. And it's interesting, like now I don't really care. I haven't weighed myself in ages, months, years even. I don't really care. It's the least interesting thing about me, really, to be honest. And I place a lot more emphasis now on health and how I feel rather than look, which again is really, really helpful. And I think often, again, because people don't feel good enough, they might put too much emphasis on how they look to feel better.
Yes. Yeah, especially as we can get validated for how we look.
Yeah.
More than anything.
Yeah.
So, has recovery affected your relationships with your partner, with your family? Have you noticed any difference in the way they perceive you, you perceive them, and how you interact?
Yeah, definitely. I think, to be fair, because I covered a lot of it up and it was in my own head, it didn't affect relationships to the same extent that it affected myself. It was more the relationship with myself that was the issue. But I do think my friends and my partner have noticed I'm much more confident. I'm much less, I need their validation much less. I used to not be able to make a single decision without asking every one of my friends what they thought, because I didn't trust my opinion enough. And my poor partner, I would always ask him such stupid questions like, what colour top should I buy? And he was brilliant, but now I don't need to ask him. I can make my own mind up. And I think they're noticing that I'm a lot less needy. I'm a lot less snappy and irritable, because when you're not eating, you are miserable, you're hungry, and you can't think straight, and you're waiting for the next meal. So you get annoyed over little things.
Yeah.
Which again, I didn't realise is part of the eating problem. And I think another big thing, especially with my partner, he's noticed, I think, I'm a lot less rigid. I'm a lot more flexible with things. So if we want to go out for a meal or we decide to go away, I'm a lot more spontaneous. And the idea of going away doesn't freak me out, because I know I'm not in control, and that's fine. We're about to go backpacking around South America for 5 weeks. So I have no idea what food, where, what we're doing. I don't even know where we're staying, to be honest. And to just hand that control over, it's amazing. And I think he's noticed that I'm a lot more fun to be around, because I'm up for more things now.
Oh, that's fantastic. So was working with me the first time you explored recovery coaching in your journey?
I'd actually tried with 2 coaches before, because I found them on YouTube and they were very good, but they weren't really for me. And I realised that because they were very food focused. And I was eating, and I was eating pretty well, and they didn't really address the psychological side of it as much. And I just felt, for me, it was much deeper than just the food. And they were encouraging me to just eat and eat and eat. And it felt very one size fits all. It wasn't very personalized. And I remember them having a set format of like how much I had to eat and when. And I was force feeding myself for weeks. but not really feeling any better.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought there's got to be more to it than this. I know there is. So I think it was when I listened to your podcast and I heard you talk about recovery, it just clicked that there was a different way of doing it. And that was the best step, really, when I realised that it was deeper. It wasn't just the food. And I needed to go back and also back to childhood. And I also needed to address the emotional side of things rather than just force feeding myself.
Were there any specific tools or strategies from our sessions that really helped you?
It wasn't so much a tool, but I really found the WhatsApp support best thing. That was the most, that was the turning point in my recovery, really, because I'd find with previous therapy and coaching, I'd have a session, I'd feel that I knew what I needed to do, and then I'd go back into work and life and forget what it was that I needed to do and not be able to challenge myself in the moment when something came up. So what I found with you is, if there was a scenario, say my friend had cooked and it was a meal that I was a bit nervous of, I could WhatsApp you and tell you how I felt, and you would send me something back to reinforce that me eating it was the right thing and to help reassure me. And then that in real time support was just a turning point. And I realized gradually as I was working with you, I started to know what you were going to say, and I started to say it to myself rather than needing you to say it to me. And that's when I was realizing that I was making progress, because you were amazing to have there to tell me it, but I started to believe it, and I started to know in myself that I was doing the right thing.
On it. You're just so incredible. You really are. So one thing that I use in my coaching a lot is self-love and self-compassion. How did you find that? And do you think it helped? Because for me, for my recovery, that was everything when I started to bring that in.
Yeah, I completely agree. So I remember Googling a lot about self-compassion work and therapy, and there's Kristen Neff's books, which are really good.
Yes, very good.
And I thought that was something I would need to do. I recognized it was a problem. And in my head, I was going to do the eating disorder coaching, sort out the eating disorder, and then my next task was the self-compassion coaching and do that. And when I started working with you, I realized I could do them at the same time, and they were very much connected. And again, for me, that was key, because that was the root cause. It was the not feeling good enough. So practicing that self-love and that compassion and that reassurance that I was enough, that then allowed me to start resisting some of the eating disorder behaviors and start forging a new path, because I realized I didn't need that way of coping anymore. I could reassure myself without using those techniques to cope. And another tool that was really helpful was a daily check-in of gratitude, but also what I liked about myself. And I thought I'd run out of things quite quickly after week one of what I liked. But then I started to really enjoy writing down, I like my laugh, or I like my smile. And at first it felt very selfish and self-centered. But then I realized that was part of the problem. I was beating myself up for wanting to like myself, because we're not taught to like ourselves in society.
No.
At all. So it felt very narcissistic. But with practice, I realized that it's actually essential, I think, for recovery. And it doesn't make you arrogant at all. It really doesn't. So
No.
it's really helpful.
It doesn't make you arrogant. I was so scared of that as well. I thought self-love was arrogance.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, I think it makes you more compassionate and more loving to other people as well.
I very much agree, and again was so surprised by that. I genuinely thought taking time for myself or practicing liking myself, not even loving, liking, I thought that was really selfish and it would take me away from my friends and family. But what I actually really realized is practicing that self-compassion made me want to give it to other people. And I was much more loving with my partner, much more giving with my patients. So I noticed if I say did a 10-minute breathing practice before I started seeing patients, I was a much better doctor. I would give them the extra 5 minutes. I would spend that time and pour that compassion back into them. So it's such a cliche thing to say, but genuinely filling up your own cup makes it spill out into other people much more.
It really does. So much. You just have so much more capacity to give when you've given to yourself first.
Absolutely.
So what does self-love mean to you now, and are you going to continue to cultivate it every day?
So yes, I am, of course.
Right answer.
It's actually really different to what I thought it meant. Again, social media paints this picture of self-love as candles and bubble bath, but it kind of isn't actually. It's, for me, it's about recognizing my emotions and saying what they are to myself, and then sometimes saying them to other people as well. So, for example, if a friend cancelled on me last minute, it's recognizing that I do feel angry about that, and that's okay. And what I would previously have done is just not said anything and let it build up into this resentment. And then 6 months down the line, my friend wouldn't understand why I would be annoyed at her. But I've learned now, self-compassion is saying to my friend, okay, I'm sorry you've had to cancel. I do feel quite angry about it because I rescheduled this for you, but that's okay. And then accepting the anger, maybe telling the person, and then letting it go and not letting it build up because you acknowledge it in the moment. And another example might be, for me, self-compassion. I come home from a day of stress in GP and I'm tired and I feel very irritable. Rather than swallowing that and being a bit irritable with my partner, I recognize it and I think, how can I cope with that emotion? Right, I want to get the energy out. So I'll dance around my living room with crazy music on, or I'll go to the gym and do some weights or something and just get into my body, allow the anger and irritation to be there, address it and let it go. And yeah, I'd say that's self-compassion.
Would you also agree that self-love and self-compassion is saying no when somebody wants you to do something and you're tired and you don't want to do it?
Yeah, I definitely agree with that as well, definitely. And that was a big thing for me as well. I was very much running around as a people pleaser and not really knowing what I wanted. So I would always be doing things for other people. And it's a tricky one because I do like that and I want to be a giving person and a kind person. But I realized I was doing that because I wanted them to like me, because I feel good enough. I wasn't really doing it for the other person. I was doing it from a negative motivator of not being good enough. And now I've realized if sometimes I say no, it feels awful, but actually sometimes a no to somebody else is a yes to yourself. And then the next time they ask you, you can do a better job and you don't feel resentful about it. Yeah.
Absolutely. Looking back, is there anything you wish you could tell your past self about this journey?
I wish I could reassure her that it is possible, and also that it isn't a linear step where you just wake up one day and feel recovered. It is a journey. And I was waiting for that moment where I suddenly saw a light bulb and I knew I was recovered. But it is a small but steady step forward kind of thing. And it's a journey. You said it becomes a journey of discovery rather than recovery. And it isn't something that you can just coast along with. You have to be proactive. So I would have reassured myself, but also I'd have emphasized how much it's worth it, and how it's so freeing. I didn't quite realize how freeing it was. I thought it would be me just being able to eat a bit more. But I'll give you another example. This is a moment where I realized I was nearly recovered. I was choosing my wedding dress, and yeah, I'd booked to see it with I booked to go with my mum and my auntie to try on. And again, it was a people pleasing thing, really. And I tried a dress on my own that I absolutely fell in love with. And I didn't need to ask anyone else's opinion. I knew it was the dress. Past me would have agonized for months, asked everyone's opinion, gone back and forth. But the recovered me went, that's my dress. I love it. I'm choosing it. I'm buying it. And my auntie and my mum, like, we can just go out for lunch instead later on. It doesn't matter that they're not there because I'm doing what I want.
Yeah, that was such a fantastic moment when you told me about that. I'm so, so proud. What advice would you give to somebody who might feel like recovery isn't possible for them?
I do think recovery is very possible for everybody. I think it does take work. I think it's interesting that everyone's version of recovery is individual.
Yes.
And I think a mistake I made was looking online and seeing all the YouTube videos out there about various recovery methods and trying to do it their way and not realizing that you'll find your own way. It doesn't need to be one size fits all approach. And I would tell people, if you're choosing somebody to work with, choose someone who has a version of recovery that you want. So I remember coming off our first call, looking at you and hearing a bit about your story and thinking, wow, that is that's where I want to be. So that's why I found you incredibly helpful as a coach, because I knew that your version of recovery was the one that fitted me the most. And that's what I wanted. So I think I would tell people you might not go down the conventional approach. And I do think the current NHS eating disorder services are not great. And to be honest, they don't really work for many people. So I'd say don't be afraid to find your own version that works for you. Don't be afraid to try different things. Don't be afraid to break up with coaches that don't work well for the way that you
Absolutely,
work.
yeah.
And just keep going, just keep fighting, because you will get there, but it can take years. But you've got years, it's worth it. It's definitely worth it.
You've certainly got years if you recover, that's for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Can I ask you a little bit about the investment in yourself? Was it hard to invest in yourself? And looking back now, would you say it was worth it?
So 100% yes, was 100% worth it. I'd do it again in a heartbeat. I did find it hard. I think it was hard because as a doctor especially, I'm conditioned to think that the NHS is the solution. And to go private effectively, pay for myself, felt a bit alien. I think that was also part of it for me as well. Money, I was quite scared of spending money. It was part of the scarcity mindset.
Yeah.
I think because I wasn't feeling my body properly. It does go, they've found in experiments that that does go along with restriction.
Yes.
Money as well, if you're not feeling exactly. So I did find it hard to spend what was effectively more than my mortgage and on myself. It felt quite a selfish thing to do. And I remember feeling annoyed at myself that I couldn't fix it on my own. I needed to spend money when, why couldn't I just sort it out myself? But I've realized now that you don't really value something if you're not paying for it. And I think if you're investing, you work harder and you value it more. So I think that was actually a really key point for me, realizing that I was good enough and worthy of investing in myself.
Yeah, and you had such a good point there. It helps you show up for yourself.
Yeah.
So much so, because you don't want to waste your own money.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. You definitely value it more, definitely.
Oh, honestly, it's been such a privilege to be your coach and to travel this journey with you and be witness to your transformation. It's brought me so much joy to be alongside you on your journey. And you are an absolute inspiration to other people as well. So strong.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you.
And if anyone that's listening wants to get in contact with you, how can they reach you?
Sure. So I have an Instagram. I'm sure you'll put the name in the show notes, but it's
Yes.
Dr. Laura Lifestyle Medic. And I'm doing some recovery content on there, some tips on there, as well as transitioning to more health-focused stuff. Again, I think going through this process has made me appreciate how short life is and how important your health is. And it's made me more passionate about helping people manage like other health problems besides eating disorders. So that is where I'm going to be putting some health advice, tips, and you can also message me on there if you've got any questions or you need any support or tips or anything like that.
Fantastic. That's such a great resource. And I'm so excited to see that growing as well. Because I really do believe that people that have walked this journey are the best people to support people further on to walk this journey.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree, definitely. It's really good to speak to people that have been through it themselves. And I think it's just made me appreciate how, without a condition in your head, whether it's depression, anxiety, or a health like a diabetic problem or something, without that restricting you, you're just so much freer if you're able to take control of your own health. So I'm really passionate now about helping people, whether it is eating disorders or other issues, take control of their own health and really focus on being like the best version of themselves.
And I love that, being the best version of yourself. That's all we can ever really want to be, isn't it? There's so much out there saying you should be this, you should be that, but we can only ever be the best version of ourselves.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And there's so much comparison out there, isn't there, with social media especially. And again, that's been a key point for me. It's you don't compare your inside to somebody else outside, which is what they're showing on social media. So
yeah,
you've got to stay in your own lane.
Definitely. Laura, thank you so much for coming on and sharing your beautiful transformation story with us. And I also wish you an amazing trip backpacking. I hope you have the best time. And it's just been such a privilege to be your coach. So thank you.
Thank you. Thanks so much for your help. Thank you.
And thank you to the listeners for joining me in celebrating Laura. And I will see you all next week. Lots of love to all of you.